First of all, welcome and thank you all for coming. My name is Amelia Layden. I'm the Associate Curator at the Haggerty Museum. And I'd just like to welcome you and also thank you for attending. And remind everyone that the museum is always free and open to the public, as are our programs. So I encourage you to sign up for our mailing list so you know what's going on and when it's going on. And that mailing list will be at the museum in the reception immediately following tonight's program. I'd also like to thank our exhibition and program sponsors, which include the Friends of the Haggerty and the Wisconsin Arts Board, with additional funds from the state of Wisconsin and the National Endowment for the Arts. Special thanks also to the exhibition lenders, Jordan D. Schnitzer, the Schnitzer Family Foundation, and Sharks, Inc. I'd also like to thank and recognize our Vice Provost, Gary Meyler, who's here with us tonight. Thanks, Gary. We're delighted to have Enrique Chagoya here with us in conjunction with the exhibition Read Between the Lines, Enrique Chagoya's Codex Prints. Enrique is currently a full professor at Stanford University's Department of Art and Art History. He's been the recipient of numerous awards, such as 2 NEA Artist Fellowships, a Tiffany Fellowship, an award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, a President's Award for Excellence from the San Francisco Art Institute, and a grant from Artadia, to mention a few. His work can be found in many public collections, including the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Metropolitan Museum, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and the Fine Arts Museum of San Francisco, among others. And 2 of his works, which are included in the exhibition, The Ghost of Liberty and Illegal Alien's Guide to the Concept of Relative Surplus Value, are also in the permanent collection of the Haggerty, so those will be on view in future years, hopefully. So after Enrique does his presentation, he'll be joined by Jason Meyler, who is the assistant professor in the Department of Foreign Languages and Literatures at Marquette. Professor Meyler has taught courses from U.S. Latino and Latina literature and Latin American film to Latin American civilization and culture, and his research interests include the many genres of U.S. Latino and Latina culture, Latin American visual culture, and American popular culture. And then following their conversation, we'll invite you all to ask questions, and then I hope you'll be able to join us for the reception, which will be in the museum immediately following the program. So without further ado, Enrique, welcome. I think you just turn yours on this side.
All right, so can you hear me well? Can you hear yet, everybody? Yeah. Okay, so I have a lot of images to go through, so I will just be speaking very generally about them, and then later, when we sit down, we could focus more on particular subjects. You know, I was born in Mexico City, and I grew up in Mexico City until I was in my mid-20s. I studied political economy, and my parents were a big influence in my vision of the world, especially my mom, who had a very deep sense of fairness, right and wrong. And I think the biggest impression I ever had was during the 1960s. In 1968, Mexico was going through, like the whole world, going through a big political changes and turmoil. And in Mexico City, right before the Olympic Games, there was all these demonstrations to reform the university program, and then it became more like a workers' movement. It got like amazingly huge, and the government, to stop it, a few weeks before the Olympic Games, made one of the biggest massacres in the history of the country. At some point, there were about 500 people who got killed in the plaza of Tlatelolco, right in Mexico City. And one day, my mother arrived at home crying, and I didn't know why she was crying, and it was because she witnessed a police killing an 11-year-old kid. At the time, I was about 15 years old or something, but that left a big impression in me. Since then, you know, I try to understand the world, and I have more questions than answers about it. The other influence, this is another picture of my mom. The other influence, it was my dad, Superman. My dad was a very scary dad to have because he was very buff. He worked in the fire department. He was an artist as well. He studied art, but never made a living as an artist. But he gave me my very first lessons when I was 7 years old. He taught me how to draw, how to paint. When I was color theory, and I guess that's because I used to bug him a lot, asking him to draw things for me until he got tired of me, and he taught me how to do it myself. But another thing that he did, that's his first job. He's the one on the front holding the hose. Another thing he did, he worked for the central bank after that. He worked with the internal security for the bank. The central bank in Mexico is the bank that prints the money. It's the mint. And they cannot afford corruption. That's maybe the only place they cannot afford the corruption. And so they have internal security. And my father was hired to work in that plant. And he began to work with a criminologist there. Sometimes they make arrests of forgers. And his office was a museum of crime. It was full of forgeries right next to the etching plates of money bills. I spoke this afternoon about my favorite story was of that of a French con artist who moved to Mexico. In France, he did a lot of forgeries too, like Moroccan money and francs. And this is in the 1950s. And in Mexico City, he began to do forgeries of Mexican money, dollar bills as well, South American money, Cuban money. And the police had a really hard time trying to catch him. And the way they caught him was because he left his girlfriend behind in France. And they were writing to each other, but eventually the girlfriend wrote to the Mexican police. And that's how they found where he was. So he got caught. And in jail, my father had to go and interview him because they were doing criminological studies. But my father began to bring him art supplies. And they became very good friends. And then this guy who had an Italian last name, San Pietro, began to talk to my father. My father began to ask him, why did you do it? And because he came from wealthy families in France. He was well educated in the arts, as well as he had everything. So he said, well, the life of an artist in France is boring, and I didn't want to just live as another artist there. I did it because I got the thrills. And so he did a beautiful painting, a little small portrait of my dad from the passport, and it looks just like a photograph of a passport. So that was amazing. But the guy had like quite a story. He sold rights for a movie that was never made, but anyway, so, but on the other hand, all these stories behind it, and my father's office, especially looking at so many objects that were look-alike, were a major influence in my work. So these are things I have at home. I'm the little chubby kid in the back with my grandmother right in Mexico City. So I don't look like my dad at all, but. And then I have a Nahua Indian, my nanny, who used to speak in her indigenous language to me in Nahuatl. So that was yet a third influence that keeps appearing in my work. I'm going to move from there into, oh, I have maybe another picture, but now let me move on to other work. So I moved to the States back in the late 70s. And I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area in 1979. I met an American sociologist in Mexico. I was working with Jesuits in a literacy campaign program in some of the poorest neighborhoods in Mexico City. And I met Janine, my first wife. And she was an American working in the same programs. So we got married eventually and moved to the countryside. And then I was working as an economist in the countryside for about 2 years. And unfortunately, she got really sick. She got parasites. And that coincided with other issues in the countryside. It got really political, got really scary. I was getting threats at the time just for defending peasants from corrupt characters who were taking, just to give you an example, there was a private bank, and the manager was lending money to villages that were organized democratically, where they have representatives, peasants, and they were subject of credit. So they got loans from this private bank, but most of the peasants were illiterate. So the manager of the bank was handling the money for a lot of villages, like millions of dollars, literally. And about 20 to 30% of the loans were totally gone. Nobody knew where they were. So I knew the only place I knew there will be some honesty. So I went to the central bank office in the town. I talked to them. They didn't say anything to me. The guy, the manager of the bank, got fired. And he went through a trial. But the legal authorities were friends with him, and they decided that the peasants still would have to pay all of the loans. And we kept fighting with it, and then I was getting threats. Some of the leaders, the peasants, were beaten up by different bands. And my bosses in Mexico City asked me to move back to Mexico City, that I should be writing theoretical books instead. And I say, no, I love the countryside. I left Mexico City because it's too polluted, sorry. But that coincided with the illness of my wife. And so that's when I moved to the States. So I moved, she was from the Bay Area. And in the Bay Area, I wanted to keep studying economics. So I went to Berkeley. I checked the school in Berkeley, and unfortunately, it was not as interesting as the School of Economics in Mexico City. Mexico City had a great School of Economics in the 70s because we got a lot of former deans of universities from South America, like Roberto Puigros, who was a dean from the Catholic University in Argentina, was one of my teachers. We had a lot of former refugees from the Spanish Civil War were still alive, teaching philosophy. I was taking classes with some of them. And we're critical of everything. In this methodology of economics, we study anything from the Greeks to Marx, to Milton Friedman, and we criticize everybody. With Marx, we criticize Marx for being Eurocentric, for being overly Darwinist. He thought that everything that might happen in England will happen in the rest of the world, that socialism was going to happen peacefully, first in England, and then the rest of the planet, and everybody will hold hands, and everybody will be happy. Then with Milton Friedman, who was the first place where his theories were applied, with Pinochet in Chile, with dictators. So anyways, it was a school where everybody was fighting against everybody, but with good arguments. So you learn a lot, especially how to think for yourself. So anyway, I decided to change careers when I moved to the Bay Area, and I took chances and studied art at the San Francisco Art Institute. And then everything I had in my economic studies went into my art. So you're going to see some of the first things I did. Forgeries was the very first thing I tried to do. Goya is a Spanish artist who's one of my favorite artists from all times. And the first time I saw his etchings, I fell in love with them. He did a whole series from the disasters, from the war when Napoleon invaded Spain in the beginning of the 19th century, in the early 1800s. He did a series that's called Disasters of War. And when I saw the original etchings, I just really fell in love with them. So I decided to make my own versions of them. This is another one of them. And I have different influences from that. So these are my versions of the forgeries. You can see the television set. Here I decided to paint Goya himself with another of my favorite artists, Posada, who developed these skeleton characters that people see on Day of the Dead. So it is the Katrina in between introducing Posada and Goya in Dead with a bull rein that's coming out of Goya's Proverbs, a series of sort of like surrealistic etchings that he did. This is one of my versions of the Disasters of War. The gas mask, I got it from, you saw that picture of Disney. They have a design of a gas mask for children behind that. I don't know if that was ever mass produced, But if you go online, you could see the gas, just Google Walt Disney gas mask for children, and you will see it. And I just copy it from there and put it in my etching. Recently, I got contacted by the Disney Foundation, and I thought, I'm going to get sued. But no, they want to write a book, and they're going to put my work in a book. So I guess really scary. So I appropriate images from different places, and I put them together this way. This is with the Mademoiselle d'Avignon, a Picasso painting that's being rescued from war. And this was the very first one I did, that back in 1983, when Ronald Reagan was supporting this group, the Contras, who were against the Sandinistas. And he himself Ronald Reagan declared himself a Contra. So it was perfect, because in the original etching of Goya, it says Contra. The same word is in the original etching. So Contra el bien general, so I thought, which translates against the common good, which is perfect. So I put it there. So I have done quite a bit of these appropriations. Eventually moved to another Goya series, the Caprichos, where he satirizes basically what will be mostly popular beliefs that that was mostly superstitious beliefs, the beliefs in witches and devils and all of that. That's what he does in the Caprichos. So I made my own versions of them. This is one of Goya's Caprichos. And this has been actually an exhibition that is traveling. They have all the Caprichos. There's about 150 of the Caprichos by Goya. And I only did like about 8 of them, which is very embarrassing. But they put them together. The Metropolitan Museum did that at some point. And I didn't even know that my work was right next to Goya. But this is my version of the same print with Snow White. And so I've been doing these stereotypes of what people, I put in quote unquote illegal aliens as monsters that people might be afraid of. But I mixed this with another character. It's called Ratfink, which was some character from the 1960s for car culture. It was created by Ed Roth. And so I made my own version of this Mexican Ratfink. Then the translation from the Spanish is, "Watch out, the boogeyman is coming" here. So some kind of from the KKK. So I just decided to, this is Fidel Castro dying. I made this series in 1999. Fidel Castro has been dying since 1999. He's dead with no end, basically. I almost feel sorry for him. But anyway, so I put the Monet sign in the communist star, because a lot of these countries are becoming capitalist now, eventually, like China, they're following their example. So self-portrait printing assets. But anyway, this is another of my favorite prints by Goya. The Sleep of Reason produces monsters. The only thing is that in this etching, the monsters are things that we protect today. The spotted owl, for instance. All these owls are something we care for. The bats are good for agriculture, and actually people are very worried today because the bats are getting all these fungal infections, and they're disappearing in some places. And cats, I love cats. I have 2 cats, and one of them is black, and I never had any bad luck, and the cat's always walking in front of me. So by all means, these are not monsters anymore. So I decided to do my own version of really scary things, which is, for me, it's military weapons. All these stealth bombers and Mohawk missiles and Apache helicopters and so on. I decided to keep the owl more like a pet, actually, more of a companion. On the bottom, I have on the rubber stamp, so like a nuclear tank with leaking nuclear waste. This is Jesse Helms on the left and Jerry Falwell on the right. And this is when I don't know if you've ever saw the Teletubbies. And Jerry Falwell said that one of the Teletubbies was gay. The purple Teletubby, because he was carrying a purse. And so there was a big campaign against the Teletubbies. I just could not believe it. So I decided to use this Goya's etching where they are giving each other a pedicure. And they did a pedicure on the Teletubby, but they went a little too far. They cut the legs, unfortunately. But so this is Monica Lewinsky and Linda Tripp with the famous tape on the bottom. These were more recent. These were I made this in 2003, right before the war in Iraq started or around that time. So that's when I did these 3 prints. To me, it was like the beginning of a tragedy. At the time, in 2003, I put Saddam Hussein in a hole. And it's really funny that a few years later, Saddam Hussein was actually in a hole. So a lot of my work, it's very crazy, but a lot of the things I do sometimes happen in the future. And I've been thinking lately I should start making nice things so they will happen in the future instead of making nasty things. It's one of my most recent pieces. This was the Metropolitan Museum just got it too. This is President Obama as one of those prints, and all these monsters around him also too, saying, "You will not escape." And I think there has been plenty of racism against the attacks on President Obama, and that's why I put this little KKK chicken on the bottom. I don't know if you could see it, but it's a rubber stamp. I've been appropriating other artists, like in this case, a British satirist from the 1800s, George Cruikshank, I'm sorry. And so I made the same thing. My own forgeries. So I really enjoy making look-alike things. So the difference between that one and this one is just very minimal. We use, I did a drawing of President Obama, and I hand-colored the whole thing. And then I worked with a computer artist, and we did a whole digital image of that. And then we etched the whole piece on an etching copper plate, a copper plate that we etched. And so it's pretty close to the original. So this is where you could see the influence of my dad's office with all the forgeries. And of course, I had to be into money as well after that. This is a digital artwork that I did where it's a box, and the numbers move all the time. So on the left, on the lower left, you will see this is when this is about $3 trillion ago. This is when the debt was $11 trillion and a half, something like that. And the share per household was really low. Right now it's about 60,000, I think, per household. But we changed all the words. I don't know if you pay attention to that, but it's federal bailout note, and this is the United States of America. And then on the bottom we say public debt brought to you by neocon economics. And I put series 1929, and the year is 2009. That's when we did the work. And instead of $1, one recession. The digital artist is Donald Farnsworth, who runs Magnolia Editions in Oakland, and he's a genius. I just love to work with him, and thanks to him, this work happened. Now I'm gonna go quickly through some of my editorial cartooning. So I do this editorial cartooning that really huge. These are like 7 by 7 feet. This is in the collection of the San Jose Museum. I've been doing this, for here you could see the time. That drawing got vandalized. My work is popular against crazy people. So somebody just came and torn the drawing in both sides. And I decided to exercise my forgery skills. So I did a forgery of myself here. And so I made the second version. So the second version is what the San Jose Museum has. And again, this drawing, I did it right around the same time Ronald Reagan was very much interested in Nicaragua, and he put Nicaragua in the context of the Cold War. He said they're a bunch of Marxists, communists, and they are not into democracy, even though I met most of the people I knew that were Nicaraguan. I met them in Mexico City, and they were all religious. They were nuns. I made friends with a pastor. They were not even Marxists. They were tired of the dictatorship of Somoza. And the Sandinistas actually managed to have a coalition, and they promised elections, which they did a few years later, and they lost. And now they won them again. But it's just like they were not part of the Soviet Union. That's the point. So I got really upset, and I did this cartoon at the time. I didn't think it would be art. I thought it was just my way to expressing my own feelings. I did a series of drawings in the future. This is during the Iran-Contra scandal. If you recall that, that's when there was this illegal trading between selling arms to the Contras, getting money from cocaine, got really convoluted. That's when Oliver North got almost indicted, and the president didn't remember what really happened. This one is at the museum, the Cantor Arts Museum at Stanford University. And they put them out on and off. Once I was sitting down next to a Republican who is a donor of the museum, and he was telling me that the best president this country ever had was Ronald Reagan. And we are compared to, George Bush. Ronald Reagan is on the left, totally a leftist, because Ronald Reagan have like amnesty for undocumented immigrants. Ronald Reagan was actually pro-choice. Republicans today are so far to the right of Ronald Reagan. So I told him, yeah, I think he will be, one of the best presidents this country ever have. You put it in that context, but also, my only questions I have at him is all the support to all these dictators in Latin America, especially in Central America, not to mention the support he gave to Saddam Hussein when the war between Iraq and Iran was happening, and all the weapons of mass destruction were given by the US to Saddam Hussein. And, besides that, and he supported also the Taliban and Osama bin Laden as well, because in the war with Afghanistan, they had to support them against the Soviet Union. So those were like big major mistakes, to think that the friends, the enemies of your enemies are your friends, so big mistake. So anyway, the curator of the museum said, oh, we have a drawing by Enrique downstairs. You want to go see it? So we went downstairs. And the guy actually liked the drawing. So we ended up having a nice dinner, a very civil exchange, luckily. Made the same drawing around the same time. This is at the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco. And this was about the time when there was like the edge of a nuclear war at some point, or nuclear accidents that were taking place back in the 80s. Other sources of my work is religious iconography. And sometimes I get in trouble for that. But this one is from an amazing book that I highly recommend to you. It's by Leo Steinberg, an art historian, who wrote a book. It's called The Sexuality of Christ in Renaissance Art and Modern Oblivion. And it's really hard to see here, but he dedicated a whole chapter of these paintings. It's baby Jesus having an erection, holding himself, kissing his mom. And the chapter explains this painting as just part of a Renaissance focus on the sexuality of Christ. There is a huge amount of paintings that focus on the sexuality of Christ, just to prove that he was just a human being, flesh and bones like everybody else. So I decided to look into those kind of work. This is another from, this is Marten van Heemskerk, a Flemish artist, same thing. And back in 1991, the National Endowment for the Arts got under attack because it gave grants to artists like Robert Mapplethorpe, because he did a series of erotic photographs that were mostly gay imagery, and against Andrés Serrano, who did that famous photograph, Peace Christ. And they basically killed the National Endowment for the Arts at that time. So So that's when I made this drawing, my own version of that painting. This one is called Not Good for Funding. And so I hope someday, and we need some lawyers for the arts, by the way, to bring back the National Endowment for the Arts. I don't know if that will ever happen. The times seem to be very difficult. All the public funding for many things is disappearing, so it's more like a dream if the NEA ever comes back. But it will help to have some good lawyers for the arts to go and talk to some politicians and explain them how positive the arts are for the recovery of the economy, like the WPA in the 1930s. So I'm going to just go quickly through all my drawings. This one I did in the first Persian Gulf War back in 1991, although I could have done it today. And this is just an abstraction of, sort of my yin and yang, which I usually play with all the time. And it could be many things. It's maybe an influence from studying philosophy at school. The Hegel and Marx have all this dialectical thinking, whatever. But at the end, I just wanted to make an abstraction of everything. Somehow everything connects to everything, and everything depends on each other at some point. So more of my drawings as a nuclear head here. It's I think what happens is the original, maybe, no, never mind. No, I think I just have a very big file, so it's hard to see the top of the drawing. This is a different version of that. I like to make fun of art talk, so a lot of the times I just put like something that sounds very profound, but I just borrow it from an art magazine. And we were just talking, I was talking to Amelia about how in art school, sometimes you are forced to study art jargon, and it gets really convoluted. I had 4 rules to follow in the School of Economics. That was, you have to be clear, precise, concise, and profound. And sometimes art writing is the opposite. It's not clear, it's not concise, it's not precise, and especially not profound. So I just love to satirize that. And I put one of my cats, Diego, right next to me. It's sort of like a self-portrait. A mood of existential alienation in climaxed in brooding meditation. That's what my cat is telling me. More of my satirical drawings. Sometimes people ask me if this was something about George Bush father and George Bush son. I say, no, it's more about how history repeats itself. Karl Marx say that history repeats twice, once as a tragedy, the second time as a farce. And I think he was like so wrong, because I think it gets worse. It's a tragedy and then a double tragedy. I will go more for Hegel, who say that the only thing that politicians have learned from history is, or the only thing we learn from history is that politicians do not learn from history. But when I wanted to portray an administration, I will do it in different ways. But this one is also part related to sort of like the conflict between religious militants and the secular imagery represented by Alice in Wonderland here on top of Dodo Bird and one of her friends. But it's an ambiguous drawing. It doesn't, I don't know if they're about to crash. They're just holding each other magically. It's called Roadmap. Oh, I should have put this one before. That's the way I did my representation of the administration, the administration of George Bush. You probably recognize all the other characters. The guy sleeping was the former CIA director, George Tenet. And you recognize, of course, Condi in the middle, Colin Powell, all these characters. So it's all history. And the witch, of course, was Osama bin Laden. Though some people told me that it looks like a self-portrait, but those are my enemies. And Tony Blair is the prince here. I guess I don't need to tell you who's Doppy. More drawings. In the original, the words are backwards. This is about our dependency on fossil fuel and how much our own freedom depends on that. And it's just somehow my way of expressing my anxieties of what's going to happen as soon as we run out of fossil fuel, which could happen in a few decades. And we are not really ready for that. My fear is that we could just get into major financial crisis everywhere. And because even with all the wind power and solar power, we won't be able to replace the amount of energy that we consume with fossil fuels. But anyways, this is another drawing I did. This is on immigration. In the middle of the finger, it says English only. And this is another piece that the Disney Foundation is interested in, and they're going to put it in a book. It's a very friendly interaction, actually, that is happening. This is called When Paradise Arrived, and it's part of a permanent collection that you could see in Napa Valley at the Di Rosa collection, if you ever go there. And this is about displacement and cultural collisions as well. Same thing with this other drawing, you know, the original conflict between Native Americans and the Europeans that arrived. I took the lady from a painting of the kidnap of Daniel Boone's daughter. So cultural interactions. And, you know, I'm going to go just quickly through the rest of my works because we won't have time to see everything. I made some drawings after the economic collapse. This is Wall Street with a regular middle class, maybe homeowner. And again, the monster here, this uncontrollable character, is saying some art talk on the top. And on the bottom, the little guy is saying, hello, my name is fuck off. I'm just going to skip all of this. It's all history. These are forgeries I did, quote unquote forgeries. So Philip Guston, he did a whole series of Richard Nixon. So his drawing is on the lower right. So I made my own version of my, these are my Philip Guston drawings. Here's another thing that happened here. I made this in 2004, right before the re-election of George Bush, which he won later. But I see there is a gun on Dick Cheney. And in the original drawing, it was a golf club. And I replaced it for a gun. And it was not until, I think, a few years after 2004 when Dick Cheney shot his friend on the face. So there was another little prediction of the future with some of my drawings. This is Donald Rumsfeld is with the glasses. And Dick Cheney and George Bush trying to understand Arabic after they destroy it. Photo opportunity here. On the beach, that's when, like major attacks were happening, and politics and religion. And this is my mix of Richard Nixon and George Bush. It's Richard Bush or George Nixon, maybe. These are some of the codices I have done. Some of these are in the exhibition at the Haggerty Museum. And they're based on the destruction of the pre-Columbian books in Mexico. So there was a major library in the Kingdom of Texcoco that hosted thousands of books that recorded sometimes annals, like yearly events that took place. The Aztecs were very good at recording things that happened every single day, every week, every month, every year. Every 52-year century, they have double centuries of 104 years. And their calendar was more precise than the Gregorian, by the way, so they didn't have to adjust every 4 years. So all of that information was lost. All those books were burned, books on medicine or books on their mythology, books on the history of the culture and the cultures they conquered, because also they were very violent culture as well. But they were also very developed. But you will barely ever hear about the library of Texcoco. You always hear, oh, they were very much into cannibalism or human sacrifice. But you don't hear about the Texcoco library, which was a tragedy. I mean, maybe not worse or better than the tragedy of the burning of the Alexandrian library so many times as well. So I decided that from that perspective, the burning of books is, and then the rewriting of history is more like an ideological construction. So I decided to make my own ideological construction. And I have done quite a few works in that regard. This book got me in big trouble. This is The Misadventures of the Romantic Cannibals. I'm going to enlarge it so you could see it a little better. Let me go. This book was in a traveling exhibition in Colorado. I have shown this book many times. I have shown it in the San Francisco Bay Area. I did it in 2002. I did it after the pedophilia scandal in the Catholic Church that began to be in the papers in 2002. And I was, how can I say, I was very shocked to learn about all these stories of pedophilia. My ex-wife, she was a victim of pedophilia herself, so I was very sensitive about it. And, but also the fact that they are very militant against same-sex marriage. And it happens that I'm very good friends with a lot of gay and lesbian couples. I have a lot of gay and lesbian faculty and students. I have a gay couple across the street from my house who are Christian, actually. They go and sing in the men's chorus in San Francisco. I go to their concerts all the time. In Mexico City, one of my best friends was a gay artist who shared his studio with me. So I took offense that there's a point where there's discrimination against this group of the population. And at the same time, the pedophilia that is being covered, and who knows for how long. Plus the fact in history, there have been times when nuns were pregnant and they were killed and their bodies were put between walls. They had been found in places in Mexico where they found the skeleton of a nun with the remains of the fetus. So all these things make me think that the church should, first of all, open up to women to be priests, and hopefully one day there will be a woman who will be a pope. But who knows when that's going to happen. If they did that, if they accepted same-sex marriage, they'll become the most popular church in the world. So I just decided to make my satirical imagery in this book. So I have like transsexual characters, and I try to present the corruption of something spiritual. So that's why I put this mix of characters, like in this case, like somebody overweight, just trying to lose weight. But these were the pages that got me in big trouble. This made it to Fox News. And Fox News trashed my work for 3 minutes. They never contacted me to explain my work. And they have somebody from the Tea Party trashing the book, saying it was just a sacrilegious work. And the way they presented was like a Stanford professor presents Jesus having oral sex. And of course, there was no mention of the pedophilia. Nobody contacted me to explain my reasons to do it. And I got a wave of hate mail. It was just really scary. But at the same time, I got the support of a pastor who agreed with my explanation, because I had a chance to talk to Associated Press and to a few other places. So I explained myself, and I even respond by email to Fox News. And the pastor in his congregation, there was a picket line outside of the exhibition where I have this work in Loveland in Colorado. And the pastor wrote me a letter, told me, asked me why you do this work. So I explained to him because of the pedophilia, et cetera, everything I told you. And he wrote me back and said, thank you for your thoughtful explanation. If you ever come to Loveland in Colorado, it will be an honor to meet you. And I was like, wow. So I wrote him back and say, I wish all Christians were like you, and we became instant friends. But then the Fox News happened, and I have to go back to the show. And unfortunately, people got really, really angry. And some lady drove all the way from Montana to the museum in Colorado. She got a crowbar, got into the museum, and destroyed the book. And it got even scarier. She got tackled by one of the people in the gallery. She got arrested. She had to pay for everything. But the Tea Party paid for all of her expenses. In the meantime, I got more waves of hate mail. It got just too much. And the pastor who defended my work, Jonathan Wiggins from the Resurrection Fellowship, which is an evangelist congregation in the same town, is the biggest congregation in town. It's about 3,000 people. He also got threats. He got a lot of threats. His house was online. I had YouTube videos attacking me. But we became very good friends from each other. We were just very supportive of each other. And eventually the things cooled down a little bit. And then one day he asked me if I could do a painting of Jesus for his congregation. And I said, wow, you know, I'm not religious myself. But if your congregation takes it from me, sure, I'll do it for free. And I told him, the only thing is nobody knows how Jesus looked like. You know, if you see among the history of representations of Jesus, they are very different from different parts of the world. So, you know, you can see the Korean baby Jesus on the top left. This like the Hungarian with red hair. This a Mexican Jesus on the lower left corner. It looks like indigenous. African American. There's Chinese Jesus, looks very Chinese, and you know, European American. So, you know, the first portraits of Jesus were done several hundred years after the time he's supposed to exist. The first representations were done in caves. They were, you know, inside some caves about 200 years after, and the first paintings about 300-400 years. So I told him, I will not really be making a portrait of Jesus. But, you know, it will be a representation. And if you are fine with that, fine. So he went back to his congregation, say everything I told you, and the congregation accepted with a standing ovation. People were crying. He showed me the video. I totally got in trouble then because I have to do the painting. So I did. So I did the painting, and I made sure the word love was clear and readable. And the message was about love. There's nothing to do but to love people who love each other. So if there is same-sex, people should love each other, or heterosexual or not, whatever. It's not about hate. It's about love. And so I sent it to him. I changed the original. I researched Mexican colonial paintings as well as Dutch paintings, and I made a mix. Although my wife thinks it's a hot Jesus, he looks very sexy. I don't know. But I try to honor. I try to do my most positive representation I could think of, just to honor the openness of this pastor. And so I changed. They originally have a cross from the Crusades, so I changed that for the word love. So I sent it to him, and I didn't know what was the reaction going to be, but they loved it. He really liked it, so they pay for the shipping. They send the painting. It's a big painting. It's about 60 by 80 inches. And then they invited me to go to the reception because they built up a whole wall for it. That's when I really got scared, because I didn't want to go to Colorado. They have an itchy finger for guns there, and I didn't want to get like shot. You know, I'm fine not being famous. Thank you very much. Boring is fine with me. But I went. I decided to take responsibility for my art, and I went there, and nobody tried to convert me, which is great. And they gave me bodyguards. I spoke to the congregation. It was beautiful interaction. I loved it. I got out of my bubble, and the pastor got out of his bubble, and the art did its job. It created a dialogue. That's maybe the best experience I ever had with my work. This is another story, but we won't have time. We are pretty much at the end. This was another controversy that ended up well. This was a commission by the San Jose Museum. Originally, the museum thought it was very angry, so we ended up putting like a little kitty cat on the right corner, a little bunny, you know. And it's a representation of a conquistador. And again, this is not Jesus. And as I said before, nobody knows how Jesus looks like to start with. But it's not Jesus in our mind. It was a conquistador. And they still didn't want it. So it was not in an exhibition of contemporary art and religious imagery. And we lent them other works. They pay us for the commission. We watched a nice apology from the museum. But eventually, our critics asked about it because they sent a press release, and the piece was not in the exhibition. So an art critic came to my studio, saw the painting, and he loved it. And he made a big article in the San Jose Mercury News. And then the next day, the museum wanted the painting. And we say, no, thank you. We're going to keep the painting because you didn't put it out in the show. And we wanted just to keep it in the warehouse. So they gave us the money already, but they couldn't do anything because they broke the contract. And the money was just honorarium for making the work. And we lent them other works. So we kept the work, we kept the money, kept a nice article. A year later, my dealer sold it. My dealer in San Francisco sold it to a couple of Catholic collectors in New York, and they loved it, Spaniards. And so I put the painting in the back of my truck, took it home one night, and the painting flew off the back of my truck in the middle of the biggest freeway. And I just saw the painting flying behind me, cars running over. I just saw how it was, I stopped my truck outside on the side of the freeway. I just saw how trucks were going over the bubble wrap and the stretcher bars. It was just painful. And then I waited for gaps between cars, pick up the 3 pieces. To make the story short, took it home. It was damaged, but not beyond repair. So I was able to patch it from the back, paint over. Luckily, we painted in a style that is very messy. So nobody noticed. I told my dealer that what happened, and she told the collectors, and they still bought it. So then I met the collectors in New York, and I explained them why they had a wheel mark on the back of the painting. But they told me they loved it. They have a dance when they put it up in their house, and well, until today we're really, really good friends. But they got a monoprint as a painting for the same price. That's what I told them. So you got a good deal. So yes. So we're going to stop here because we're going to have the interactions. That's some of my prints that you could see. And unfortunately, we really run out of time. This is in the exhibition at the Haggerty Museum. This is about the economy and death. And maybe we could talk more about the codices and the symbolic elements behind it. This is an interesting page about money and power behind it, and the symbolic meaning of money. Things I did about the global warming that is affecting everybody. Again, this one I did it before the tsunami in Japan, just about a year before the tsunami in Japan. Unfortunately, it happened there. So a lot of my work goes back to the Codex and the interaction between European and American. This is Cannibals soup with all these brands, artist brands with rice, cream of dealer, art historian alphabet, etc., curator's liver, critic's tongue. So after so many attacks, sometimes I just do something just very ghostly, so people will barely see what I'm doing. And hopefully nobody will get too offended. And I'm just going to show you, finally, just a few paintings that I have done. Illegal Aliens Guide to Greater America, which is an abstraction. Don't do today what you can do tomorrow, which is my motto, or self-portrait as a lazy Mexican, maybe. Devils torture me. Happy illegal aliens here having a party crossing the Rio Grande, but it's a forgery painting after it's George Bingham. And this is how Cubans cross the ocean. They fix these cars and make them amphibious. They could be working for GM. Some of the paintings I have done from that series. And I will end here because I think there might be some questions. But thank you for such for waiting for such a long presentation. I could have lasted even another hour here, but thank you for listening to my talk. And my apologies for taking longer, Jason. We were going to sit down earlier and have this conversation that we're about to start. So,
no, thank you.
I'm very sorry I got carried away.
No, it's a pleasure, and I lost track of time too, just being completely overwhelmed and just kind of lost myself in your art. So thank you very much. I must confess that I too am a border crosser, but of the academic kind. I have my professional training in U.S. Latino literature primarily, but I keep finding myself pulled toward visual and audiovisual work. So with that in mind, I'm wondering, Enrique, what do you think about the internet as a way to bring all these visual images into conversation today in many different fields? I'm thinking about Pinterest, YouTube, Netflix. I from my couch in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, I can flip through Felipe Guamán de Poya's The New Chronicle and Good Government is translated into English. What kind of importance do you see our culture giving to images? I see you're just replete with images in your artwork. What's the future of images?
Well, two things. I think the access that we have online now, which is incredibly, it's amazing. I don't think humanity had this experience before, having access to so much information. It's a double-edged blade, I would say, because in the one hand, you have access to almost anything, but in the other hand, you don't really get knowledge from it. You just get a lot of dispersed information, so it's very chaotic. And the one thing that is a little worrisome is also that you lose your privacy. And you know, when they have this controversy, that was the scary thing because people know where you live, you know, basically. So, it's not so great. And also, you know, now there's all these companies basically collecting information from everything you do online, and that's becoming a product, and that's a marketing product as well. So what you do. So I've been rejecting to be online as much as I could. I'm not in Facebook. I'm not, you know, in any of these social networks. But there's a point where you have to deal with it. And but most of the images of my work that you will see online is something I didn't post. Somebody else did. And there's a lot of it. But there's. It's like the cat is out of the bag, and we have to reckon with now.
Right. I heard a conversation this weekend with on the radio with Seth Godin. He's an internet entrepreneur, founder of Squiddo.com, I believe, and he was talking a lot about this the overwhelming presence that people have and images have on the internet, and he was also getting to the fact where he thought. He saw more and more artists in society, that everyone can be an artist. He thinks of Steve Jobs as an artist. Do you think there's a growing cross-fertilization between the art field and other fields, such as economics? I know you've had a lot of economic influence in your work. Is there art in politics and marketing and education? Is this a good thing? Would this be the good side of the sword?
Well, it could break away the elitism part of art, but it's not really happening in the arts yet. It's not happening like in the printed media where, you know, there's a shift clearly happening between printed media and electronic media for information, just for newspapers, for instance. That's happening a lot. And that's not really happening in the arts, not yet. I know that might happen. The only difference is that the appreciation of art, it's very different when you see it in person, especially two-dimensional art. It's different if you have something digital. But even digital art is difficult to appreciate online. There's an artist who just did the most amazing digital collage, film collage ever made, I think. It's Christian Marclay. He did, if you ever had a chance to see this film, be ready to be there overnight. It's a 24-hour-long film of collages of thousands of movies in which every minute there is a scene from a movie with the exact time that is the real time. So if right now it's like 5 minutes after 7, you will be watching a movie where there's a scene where it's 5 minutes after 7. And it could be a Hitchcock movie, could be any movie. And then you sit down, and then you see the next minute. It will be 7 minutes after 6, a different movie, but somebody with a clock, or a far distant clock in a city, and so on. So go, 7 minutes, 7 hours and 7 minutes, 7 hours and 8 minutes, and so on. So there's a scene like at 5 p.m. There's a lot of movies where everybody's checking out of the factory. At midnight, there's a lot of horror movies, wolves, vampires. So it's a 24-hour long film. And the artists do not put it online. You cannot see it. Okay. That's one of the things that actually artists resist to do that. The artist has a really hard problem of just putting it in small screen. He wants to have the audience to have the experience on a large movie screen, and it's a beautiful experience. The sound is another collage work that's so impeccable. If you ever try to see his work, I mean, good luck trying to get in, because it's going to be probably really popular. But be ready also to, once you get a seat, bring your lunches and the sleeping bags. If there's places like the LA County Museum was showing that film for the whole 24 hours. And I remember the first time I saw it, I didn't know. I just thought I was going to see it for 15 minutes because everybody's telling me to go see it. I stayed there 2 hours, and still we could not leave. It was okay, 1 more minute, 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes, and it's very engaging. It's the most engaging video artwork I have ever seen in my life, but it's not internet art. Okay. It's he even got really upset with the people who funded the art when they did a party in their house and they put the whole film on their on their computer screen. Sure. He walked away from the party. Maybe that's a little prima donna-ish, but but my point is that there's some kinds of art that you could only see in person. Although the internet is really good for collecting information and collecting thinking about it if you get into blogs and things like that. So that's what I think is a double edge, a mix. It's a mixed blessing, if you want to put it that way.
Sure. Now, thinking about the reproduction and the internet, maybe if we want away from internet, I confess that I own the Codex Espangliensis, I own Friendly Cannibals. These are mass-produced works. Did you have any fear making mass-produced Codex books?
No, in that sense, those pieces were meant to be books, to be reproduced. And no, I don't have any problem. I think that makes the process a little more democratic. And that's the original idea of printmaking, to have multiple originals. And there have been artists that have done infinite reproduction ideas, like Felix Gonzalez Torres, the artist who, if you ever go to a museum and see a pile of posters and you could walk away with one, they're for free, and they're supposed to be there forever, like people could keep printing them. And he also had like candy in blue and red. They are all related about victims of AIDS. In some cases, the candy represents victims of AIDS. And you could get away with the candy. Last time I saw his work was at the Museum of Modern Art, and was this pile of candy. I just grabbed a couple of them. Some of the people were like horrified. I was touching the art. They were looking at the guard. The guard wasn't doing anything. So, and that's supposed to be an infinite edition of a work. In that sense, there's something very democratic about it, and it still is not internet art. And it's direct experience. I think the experience of art depends what the artist means, because this art that is digital, and then it's meant to be for the internet, and that's a different story, and that's more like meant to be, but it really depends.
Okay. No, good. I have one or two quick more questions, and I think maybe we can open up to the public, if that's okay. I deal with literature. I, in particular, like the work of Junot Diaz and Abraham Rodriguez. And I like their work, I think, because I can see their subject matter in my mind's eye. And I'm wondering if there is another medium that you haven't tried out yet that you want to go into. Would it be a comic book, an Enrique Chagoya comic book, a graphic novel? Is there any other medium you haven't tried out yet?
I have a lot of short stories I'm working on, and I want to maybe write some short stories. I have a lot of crazy stories that have, besides the, the attacks on my work, but I have like a lot of surrealistic stories that happen in my life. I'm writing about them.
Okay.
But I want to put them in images that are not related to the book. So I'm still working on it. Or if not, maybe a film where the story and the images don't necessarily connect with each other, but they are like a duet. And but it's still work in progress.
So like the work of Junot Diaz, it's this kind of it's a collision of content and image. Sometimes this disconnect and uncomfortable feeling of an illegal alien.
Exactly. I mean, there's many stories like that. Stories of displacement are very important to me. I mean, I don't know if we have time to just give you an example of things that we're talking about, because that was an abstraction, but I have so many experiences in one single trip to Baja. I went to Baja with a friend of mine, an American artist, Michael Bradley, who lives in the Bay Area, and we went there to put together an exhibition of prints from Bay Area artists into a museum in Baja, in La Paz. And every single day, crazy things were happening to us. It was just out of this world. And one of the things that happened, one day we were installing the work, a piece of glass falling to his eye. And the same day, my left glass, and the same side of the eye, glass pop off my frames, and it was the time when I still have glass, not plastic like this, and it broke, it got destroyed, and a friend of mine, a third friend of mine who was hosting us, hit his face and had like a blue eye, and the three of us were like the three blind mice.
Ooh.
So that was one story. The second one, this is the last, because I have like 20 of them. The second one was really incredible. We were bored one day, and I asked my friend who lived there, it was a Mexican-Irish friend, Pancho McManus, who lived there. And I told Pancho, what do you do in this town? There's nothing here. Well, there's only one thing to do, is go to the boxing matches. And I said, no, I hate boxing. I told you, I don't want to go boxing. But I said, there's nothing else you asked me, so let's go there. You will like it. I don't know if I will like it, but let's go there. So we ended up going to the boxing match, the three of us. And it was like a Sunday church. Families were like all dressed up, all very friendly with each other, relatives talking to each other from the distance, saying hello, everybody's smiling. Then the first fight starts, and one of the boxers clearly had no money for the equipment, so he cut some pants. He had like Converse shoes for the boxing. The other boxer was more professional, but the favorite boxer was the poor guy, and the other guy was not so favorite. And the fight started, and it sounded like a fight in the street. I mean, the blows, when you go to one of these things, they sound like you're watching somebody in the street hitting each other. It's really violent. They got bloody very quickly, but people were cracking jokes against the referee. And people were laughing at some point, and then they were horrified about how their favorite boxer was losing. And finally, then the fight stopped. And thank goodness, we were happy. Okay, the boxer survived. He went away. He's bloody, whatever. And then there was a break. The lights went on, and then the boxer that lost came out, like totally went to the shower, combed himself, was all dressed up, clean. And he was selling popcorn. Oh, goodness. And that really, that hit me. I mean, I just hallucinated this guy's life, in a second. We bought two bags of popcorn per person. We bought 6 bags of popcorn from him. So stories like this, I would like to put in a book and put one of my prints that might have nothing to do with the book. But this was just one trip. I had like 20 in that single trip.
Fantastic.
But we won't have time to do
No, I'd look forward to reading something on those lines.
The
That's wonderful.
Match, infamous.
Last question on my behalf. Are there any subjects that are taboo in your work, that you won't touch? You've done quite a bit of political, religious.
Really, no, but if this experience I have get me a lesson. freedom of expression is connected to context. The context is very important for the freedom of expression. When they don't match, they're in trouble. I have, for instance, an Iranian artist who was my student at Stanford, and he's from Iranian parents, but he was born in Berkeley, so he's American. And he had a show in Iran, and he asked me if I wanted to show with him. And I say, no way, thank you, but I know. If I just try to get my passport or where they might screen my work and they might get offended with anything I do, or if I go there, they might not let me out. I say, no, I don't think so. And that's when I thought how important context is for the freedom of expression. And that's something that sometimes a lot of us take for granted in this country. But sometimes if somebody just doesn't have the same opinion, they could go violent. And it's really scary. With this experience, I have to talk to the Stanford police, to my neighbors, to flag my house. But I felt somehow in some context, that same book was not offending anybody, because I have the same book shown in Washington, D.C., at the same time that it was attacked in Colorado. I have another copy that I have shown it in the Bay Area so many times. Nobody cared about it in the Bay Area. So it's a very interesting lesson. Sure. There are different pockets of freedom in this country and in the world that are more open, and other pockets where people still have to fight for their rights. Mm-hmm. So that's a lesson I learned from my work. So I might do anything that goes through my mind, but I might not be able to show it everywhere. I mean, that's where I have to be. And this time, I didn't even know my work was out in that museum, so I didn't have any control over that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. I'm not sure, Amelia, how much time do you want to? A couple questions? Would like to open the floor up to anyone else who might have a question or comment?
Hope I did not over-explain myself, and maybe I did.
Yes. You influence at all, one of the things, some of your art, especially some of the art pieces, remind me a little bit of some of these murals. These fantastic murals that Mexican artists created during the early 20th century, during the Revolution, etc. Were these an influence on you in any way?
No, the influence of muralism in my work is very minimal because I grew up with it. And I was somehow oppressed by the Mexican muralism. Right. It was sort of like the socialist realism of Mexico. I have it in the cover of my textbooks in the elementary school. So I associate them with authority, basically, with my teachers or with the government. But the ideas were very powerful, especially in the beginning. There was, even though it was a nationalistic element behind it, they played an important role in the development of other contemporary practices. Some of the muralists that when they came to the States played an influence in people like Jackson Pollock, among others. Like Jackson Pollock took the workshop by Siqueiros, one of the muralists. And Jackson Pollock said that some of the first things that attracted him were the drippings on the floor. And that's when he started to think about how beautiful drippings were. This from not that anything that Siqueiros taught him, though, but still there was this connection. People like Philip Gaston did muralism in Mexico as well, some amazing murals. So I grew up, then I began to appreciate more muralism. But I was more when I was in Mexico, I was more into non-representational art. I did a lot of abstraction, and then I went to art school briefly. My teachers didn't like my abstractions. They were challenging me about it, and I quit the art school because of that. That's when I went to economics instead. But
I thought some of the themes of social protest and of social justice, the themes were similar.
You know where I get the influence more from cartoonists.
Okay.
From editorial cartoonists. I think I would have been an editorial cartoonist if I had that opportunity in my life. And because I like to play with high and low brow, high art, low art. I like to mix them, but I feel attracted to the unpretentiousness of editorial cartooning, and I don't try to convince anybody about anything, but I usually try to express myself with some humor. And that's where the editorial cartooning, I think, comes. When I try to laugh rather than cry, yeah, and I follow that more example. And there is an interesting definition of humor by the surrealists, by André Breton, define surrealist humor as this is very, very interesting. The triumph, sounds like art talk, but it's not art talk. Okay? So it's the triumph of pleasure over pain under the worst conditions for pleasure. And I felt that's what I like. You know, the triumph of pleasure over pain when you have all the odds against pleasure. So, so I tried to work my way through these ideas. And I grew up in a culture where humor is very reverent, even religious humor. These jokes that will not cross the border, I think. It's nasty. But also very cultural. And I grew up in a family that is a bunch of sharp tongues. They attack each other with humor, and if you get upset, you lose. So, like I have like a 4-year-old nephew that was having an argument about who was uglier with my brother-in-law, and they were exchanging insults, and they were saying, your face is like a car crash, and your face is like an extraterrestrial bacteria. And finally my little nephew told my brother-in-law, and you look like a painting of my uncle Enrique. He won the fight. Exactly. So, but that's basically something that influenced my work. This kind of family.
I think underscoring again the relationship with Guadalupe Posada. I see those family feuds in the boxing match. I can see the etching of Guadalupe Posada there. Anyone else that'd like to ask a question?
I don't need a microphone. Disney. Tell us about Disney, because whenever I think of Disney, I think of huge corporations with lawyers that beat the crap out of an artist that tries to use it.
Yeah, I get worried about it. But I was very careful to follow the copyright law. There's a copyright exception in the copyright law. As far as I know, because I'm not a lawyer. But the copyright exception is you could use copyrighted material as long as it's for educational purposes, has a critical side, and you change the essence of the original. So when you're translating something different than the original, and it's not for profit. And I check all the boxes as much as I could. And so in my work, Mickey Mouse is not an innocent cartoon. It's a symbol. It has more of a symbolic element of Western influences against indigenous cultures. So it's working more the role of language. As you and I are using the word Disney without permission of Disney to use the word Disney, it's part of a sentence. So if I have done only Mickey Mouse on a T-shirt, I would have been a counterfeit artist, basically. So that's the difference. And I have shown my work in New York, in Los Angeles, places where I would have been in big trouble if I just got a little bit out of that area. And I basically break even with my art, so there's not much money to make from me anyway. And then I got contacted this year by the Disney Foundation, and that's when I got, they're gonna ask me some questions about my art, I don't know. But it was actually a very friendly scholar who is including a lot of artists who have used sort of like Mickey Mouse character in their art, like Klaus Oldenburg and Lim Folkus is this LA artist, myself. It's a list of a lot of artists, which I was flattered to be in the company with. Wow. And we talked a little bit about, what about copyright, and not even came about. He actually asked me my permission to reproduce the one with the little girl, that is kind of like that. So. I guess I clear something there, an obstacle. But other artists get in big trouble with copyright. Like people like Jeff Koons got in big trouble when he appropriated a photograph from a unknown photographer a couple holding about 10 German Shepherd puppies. They're holding. It's a cute photograph. He bought the photograph, sent it to his studio in Italy, and asked them to make 3 replicas of that in wood and color, because the photograph was in black and white. And then he sold them for about $300,000 each, 3 of them, almost $1 million. And the photographer saw the image in one of the art magazines, and he got really upset, and he sued him. They went to court, and Jeff Koons lost the lawsuit, and he got to give all the money to the profits that he made to the photographer. And the judges say that he just didn't change the essence of the work. Just adding color is not enough. Or changing it from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional was not enough. It has to be more of a qualitative change of the essence of the subject matter to make it acceptable as an exception to the copyright. So these lawsuits are very interesting for me, and this is where some lawyers would be great for the arts, because they could advise artists like myself, like you are okay here or not, or they could defend artists when they get in trouble too as well. But I hope I answered your question.
Any other questions? The microphone?
No, that's okay. Just a technical question. In the Codex books in the show here, you use amate paper.
Yes.
It's important for you, isn't it?
Yes, because
explain a little bit?
It's the same paper the indigenous cultures used to use for their ancient books. The Mayans, the Aztecs, they did other books on animal skin as well. But a great deal of their books were done on this bark paper, and it's still being made by indigenous people. The paper I use is bought from the mountains in Puebla. It's done by Otomi Indians. So I felt it was important to use the same paper. So it's a very difficult paper to work on. It's a nightmare for the lithographer, the lithographer who published them, because every time they run the book through the press, the paper expands, and then you lose the registration of the colors. It will look like a bad print of a Sunday paper, the comics, when they go totally off. So what he does, he has to run the paper like about 10 times through the press to flatten it up as much as possible. So it's a lot of work. And then the paper does not expand anymore, it's more flat, and then that's how he prints it. It's a nightmare for the printer. I totally respect the labor that was behind that amount of work, but it has a symbolic element. That paper was forbidden. The production of the paper was forbidden for 300 years. Because the Spaniards, during the colonial times, they didn't want the indigenous people to have any paper to make any books. I mean, that's why they burned all the books in the first place. But they didn't want any paper to indigenous people because that's considered subversive. And anybody caught with it will be sent to the Holy Inquisition and, have a nice little forget about waterboarding. That was just, they just shut a coffin with nails on your body. Basically, that's what they did. But so it's a miracle that the technique survived the colonial times, and it's a miracle in a way that still indigenous people are the main producers of this paper. So it's still farms of that paper, and I hope they survive all these climate changes. I don't know what's going to happen. Eventually it might end up being a very rare book, but it has a cultural history, and thank you for your question. I hope I answered. Well,
along the same lines, the colors, the predominance of black and red have deep roots in
pre-Columbian culture.
Pre-Columbian cultures.
They're yang and yin. They represent life and death in a way. This is a story of, for instance, the mythological story of the discovery, quote-unquote, discovery of corn. Corn was kind of like genetically modified crop by the Aztecs, but not chemically, but with more friendly, natural ways. The original corn was very small, and it grew into different species of corn, colors and sizes, and but there's a mythological story behind that is in red and black. The story goes that there was a black ant carrying a piece of corn, and the major god, the big god Quetzalcoatl, the feathered snake, wanted to know where that corn came from. and he turned off the opposite color of the ant. I say red ant, so he turned into a black ant. So he talked to the black ant, talked to the red ant, and the red ant told him that the corn came from the holy mountain of the holy meal. And then Quetzalcoatl knew where that mountain was, and he ordered the gods of rain to rain over the mountain, and the mountain exploded, and the corn dispersed itself through the four directions of the world in the Nahua mythology. And that's how corn was spread to north, south, east, and west of the indigenous world. And that involves red and black. And most of the Mayan books and ceramics are done with red and black inks. Although the red is sort of like more like a brick red, so some kind of like, it's a little darker. It's not bright red, but it still has the same symbology of dualities. For them, the dualities brought you to knowledge. So I answered that.
That's fantastic. I agree.
There is a reception too after.
I was going to say exactly that.
If people have questions, we're going to head over to the museum. There's food and drink, and everybody's welcome. So if you'll just join me in thanking Enrique.
Yes, thank you so much.